In the spring of 1662, on a fortified island off the coast of China, a vastly different worlds collided in an event that would go down in history as one of the most dramatic sieges in Asia. On one side stood the formidable Dutch East India Company, the reigning power in global trade and colonial expansion, with their cannons trained seaward from the imposing walls of Fort Zeelandia. Opposing them was a fierce Chinese warlord, driven by a burning desire for vengeance, leading 25,000 warriors across perilous waters to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. This is the compelling story of Koxinga, the legendary hero who would vanquish the Dutch and alter the fate of Taiwan forever. To fully grasp the fury that propelled this remarkable man to risk everything in a desperate bid for survival, we must first immerse ourselves in the tumultuous chaos that engulfed China during the mid-17th century, a time when empires crumbled, loyalties shifted like sand, and one man's refusal to bow down would spark a legend that continues to resonate today. Koxinga's early life, the son of a merchant and a Japanese woman. In the year 1624, a child was born in the bustling port of Hirado, Japan. Destined to shake the foundations of two empires, Zheng Chenggong was a Chinese merchant who ascended from humble origins to command extensive trading networks across the South China Sea. While his mother, Tagawa Matsu, hailed from Japan, as she lovingly cradled the boy, she could not foresee that he would carry within him the blood and heritage of two nations. Named Fuku Matsu, a Japanese name signifying fortunate pine, he spent his early years in the shadow of Mount Fuji, blissfully unaware that fate had already charted a grand destiny for him. When Fukumatsu turned 7, his father brought him across the waters to Fujian province, where the rich traditions of China awaited him. Among the misty mountains and lush rice paddies of his ancestral homeland, Fukumatsu transformed into Zheng Chenggong, a brilliant student who eagerly devoured the classics and passionately mastered military strategy. His mind was as sharp as a blade, his ambition knew no bounds, and his loyalty to the Ming dynasty was unwavering. However, in 1644, the world that Zheng Chenggong knew began to crumble. The once mighty Ming dynasty, which had presided over China for nearly 3 centuries, collapsed under the weight of rebellion and foreign invasion. Peasant armies stormed the gates of Beijing, and in a moment of despair, the emperor hanged himself within the forbidden city. As Manchu horsemen descended from the north, their banners unfurling like a dark storm cloud, they claimed the dragon throne for their new Qing dynasty. For many, this represented merely a shift in dynasties, as natural as the changing of the seasons. But for Zheng Chenggong, it was a profound betrayal of everything he held sacred. In a historic turn of fate, when the last Ming emperor, the Wu emperor, conferred upon him the imperial surname Zhu in 1645, the young warrior felt the weight of the heavens resting upon him. He was no longer just Zheng Chenggong, he had become Koxinga, lord of the imperial surname, and he vowed to sacrifice everything to ensure that the Ming legacy would not be extinguished forever. While Koxinga was resolute in his mission, his father bore witness to the Manchu conquest with a more pragmatic perspective. When Qing leaders offered Zheng Chenggong power and influence in their new government, he saw an opportunity for their family where his son saw betrayal. "The Ming is finished," he urged Koxinga. "Join me, serve the Qing, and our family will prosper under the new dynasty." Koxinga's response was thunderous and instantaneous. "I would rather die with honor than live in shame," he declared. "The Ming have raised me, educated me, and given me purpose. I will not abandon them in their darkest hour." From that fateful moment of defiance stemmed a profound legend, cultivating a loyalist base, forging a fleet of resistance. As the Qing dynasty consolidated its power over mainland China, Koxinga retreated to the coastal islands of Xiamen and Jinmen, where he gathered the scattered remnants of Ming loyalists, pirates and merchants, scholars and soldiers. Those who refused to bow to foreign rule flocked to his banner. Over the course of 12 years, he built a formidable force, his fleet swelling until it dominated the South China Sea. The rebellious islands became his kingdom, a defiant stronghold of Ming loyalty in a world that had seemingly moved on. From this bastion, his ships launched attacks against Qing forces along the coast, disrupting their trade and keeping alive the flickering hope that the Dragon Throne could return to its rightful hands. His name began to spread like wildfire. It was whispered in tea houses and celebrated in taverns as the tale of the prince who refused to surrender. But Koxinga was far more than just a warrior. He was a visionary who understood that raw military power alone would not suffice to restore the Ming dynasty. What he needed was a secure base, a place where he could construct not only an army, but also an effective government that reflected the values of the dynasty he sought to revive. In 1659, he embarked on his boldest gambit yet, sailing up the Yangtze River with his entire fleet to assault Nanjing, the southern capital of China. This ambitious attack, however, turned into a disaster. The Qing forces, now wary of Koxinga's naval capabilities, were ready. His ships were caught in the river, his army decimated, and the prince himself barely managed to escape with his life. The crushing defeat shattered his reputation and scattered his troops. While the Qing intensified their assaults on his island strongholds, employing tactics to inhibit his trade routes and sway his allies against him. As 1660 waned, Koxinga faced the bleakest period of his life. His treasury was depleted, his soldiers were starving, and his dream of restoration felt more distant than ever. The Qing offered leniency to those who would surrender, and many of his followers found the allure irresistible. The great prince of the sea was running out of options, cornered by an enemy that seemed invincible. Then, in the depths of despair, a flicker of hope materialized in an unexpected form. A Chinese man named He Ben, who had worked for the Dutch East India Company on Taiwan, defected to Koxinga's side with a life-changing gift, a meticulously drawn map detailing the locations of all Dutch forts, garrisons, and vulnerabilities within their colonial administration. "Taiwan is ripe for the taking," he confided. Taiwan, or Formosa, as the Portuguese had dubbed it, had been under Dutch control for nearly 40 years. The Dutch had constructed Fort Zeelandia on the island's western shore, a formidable structure that dominated the harbor and safeguarded their lucrative trade with China and Japan. From this stronghold, the Dutch exerted control over the island's plains, exacting tribute from native tribes and prospering from the flow of sugar and rice through their warehouses. Yet as Koxinga pored over He Ben's intelligence, he began to see opportunity where others perceived only Dutch strength. The fortress, while impressive, was far from its homeland, relying on supply ships traveling thousands of miles across ocean. The Dutch garrison, despite being disciplined, numbered fewer than 1,000 soldiers tasked with holding an island of considerable size. And most importantly, the Dutch had grown complacent in their prosperity, lulled into a false sense of security, believing that no Chinese force could challenge their dominance over the sea. They were about to learn a grave lesson in underestimating their opponent. As winter turned to spring in 1661, preparations commenced for an audacious campaign that would redefine Koxinga's legacy. He would not merely raid Taiwan and retreat, as he had done with previous Dutch positions. He aimed for complete conquest, intending to establish the foundation of a new Ming kingdom beyond the reach of Qing armies. Harboring in Xiamen and Jinmen, hundreds of junks gathered like ominous storm clouds on the horizon. Carpenters toiled day and night to repair vessels and replace masts, while armory smiths forged weapons for the thousands of warriors who were drawn to Koxinga's banner. The prince moved among his men, his mere presence worth a dozen stirring speeches, his fervor infectious as the pursuit of glory consumed them. The preparations became unprecedented. Echoing in the shipyards of Xiamen where the hammering of tools resonated like the drumbeats of war, transforming fishing vessels into instruments of conquest. Koxinga spared no expenditure, pouring the final remnants of his treasury into securing provisions, weapons, and the colossal task of transporting an entire army across treacherous waters. His admirals cautioned him, deeming the undertaking reckless, suggesting that the Dutch fleet would obliterate them before they ever reached Taiwan shores. But Koxinga had studied his adversary with care. While the Dutch were adept navigators of the open oceans, their warships bristled with bronze cannons, and were designed for deep-sea battles, ill-suited for the shallow coastal skirmishes that favored Chinese vessels. More critically, the Dutch had grown lethargic in their dominance. Their patrols had become routine, and their vigilance dulled by decades of unchallenged power. March 23, 1661. The Armada set sail for Taiwan. The moment of reckoning arrived on March 23, 1661, as dawn cast its golden light over the harbor of Kinmen. The largest invasion fleet in Chinese history began to advance. Hundreds of junks filled the waters, their red sails unfurling under the morning sun like drops of blood on silk. At the forefront sailed Koxinga's flagship, adorned with a fierce dragon figurehead that seemed poised to unleash its fiery wrath upon his foes. Among the 25,000 warriors aboard, the soldiers glistened in armor, their weapons of war ready for the clash. Contrary to the portrayal of desperate pirates by their adversaries, these were the elite warriors of southern Chinamen who had chosen exile over subjugation and who would gladly follow their prince into the depths of hell if commanded. The fleet made its first landfall at the Penghu Islands, rocky outposts that guarded the approaches to Taiwan. Here, Koxinga established a forward base, leaving a small garrison behind to secure a route for retreat while the bulk of his forces pressed on toward their ultimate prize. The Dutch, maintaining lookout watch in Penghu, fled at the mere sight of the Chinese armada, racing back to inform their superiors that the storm they had long feared was finally upon them. 2 days later, on April 2nd, the invasion fleet appeared off the coast of Taiwan, a vision resembling a waking nightmare. The Dutch had anticipated raids, perhaps the sight of a few pirate junks in search of easy plunder. Instead, they faced an armada that darkened the seas, flying banners emblazoned with the ancient symbols of the Ming dynasty. The lookouts at Fort Zeelandia barely processed the sight of ship after ship appearing on the horizon, more vessels than they had ever witnessed converging at once. Inside the fortress, Governor Frederick Coyet, a veteran administrator who had dedicated decades to the company, received this news with escalating dread. Though he had dealt with Chinese pirates before, this was an entirely different threat. Reports indicated that Koxinga himself was leading the attack, the legendary sea prince whose very name struck fear into Qing hearts. To make matters worse, the garrison was severely undermanned, with soldiers dispatched to other Dutch possessions, leaving fewer than 1,000 men to defend the most crucial stronghold in the Indies. Coyet hastened to send urgent messages to Batavia, pleading for reinforcements and provisions. However, assistance was weeks away at best, the Chinese fleet poised to anchor in the bay before his messages could find their vessels. Gathering his officers in the great hall of the fortress, Coyet sensed that the massive stone walls suddenly felt perilously thin against the daunting force amassing. Outside their gates, the Dutch did possess one advantage that offered them a glimmer of hope. 3 warships anchored in the harbor, equipped with the finest cannons available. Their flagship, the Hector, boasted 50 guns, having never known defeat at sea. Surely these Chinese junks, no matter how abundant, could not withstand European firepower and seamanship. Admiral Thomas Padel, commander of the diminutive Dutch fleet, exuded optimism that a single coordinated strike would send the invaders scattering like leaves before a hurricane. But Koxinga had not ventured this far only to be halted by Dutch arrogance. As his fleet approached the harbor, he devised a strategy that caught his opponents completely off guard. Instead of heading directly into the cannons of the awaiting warships, he split his force, redirecting the majority of his fleet through shallow channels that the Dutch had deemed unsuitable for large vessels. His pilots, well acquainted with the waters, were guided by local fishermen and traders who had navigated these coasts for generations. The brilliance of this maneuver lay in its simplicity, while the Dutch fleet remained poised in the deeper channel, predicting a frontal assault. Koxinga's primary force slipped silently through the shallows, merging behind their enemy's position before they could respond. Soon, the 3 Dutch warships found themselves encircled, cut off from the fortress they were sworn to protect. Facing enemies from every direction, Admiral Padel ordered a hasty attack. His ships pivoted, aiming to unleash their broadsides upon the nearest Chinese vessels. The resounding thunder of cannon fire reverberated across the water as their bronze cannons erupted in unison iron shots, striking junk holes, sending deadly splinters flying. For a fleeting moment, it seemed that the Dutch might break free, their superior firepower allowing them to carve through the Chinese formation. But calamity struck with the swiftness of a lightning bolt. A Chinese fireship, its hull packed with explosives and its crew already evacuated, collided against the side of the Hector. The desperate Dutch sailors fought to push it away, but the fuses were already ignited, flames racing toward barrels of gunpowder stored aboard the warship. Though when the explosion detonated, it resonated for miles. A mighty column of fire and smoke marked the watershed moment in Dutch naval dominance in Taiwanese waters. The remaining 2 ships, a yacht and a smaller warship, found themselves hopelessly outmatched, their captains exhibiting valor, but utterly unable to sway the outcome against insurmountable odds. One by one, Chinese fireships and boarding parties overwhelmed the beleaguered vessels, with their crews either perishing in battle or being taken prisoner as bargaining chips for the siege that lay ahead. With the harbor now secure, Koxinga's indomitable will and audacious gamble had wrought a seismic shift in the balance of power, forever altering the course of history. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.